Welcome back. Your midnight movie this week is a classic of 70s crime cinema. This film is often marketed as blaxploitation. It really isn't. And the reason for that is, unlike a lot of blaxploitation, this film is really grounded. Blaxploitation had a lot of sort of audacious elements. Um, it wasn't always totally the same throughout. And a classic like this week's film, your midnight movie, is Across from 110th Street. This film stars the great Anthony Quinn and the great Yaphet Kotto. Maybe some of you younger viewers may not be familiar with either of these guys, but I assure you, if you want to see what a performance is, if you want to see two absolute titans of film acting, Across 110th Street is maybe one of the best examples I could give you. On top of the fact that it is 70s, it's a crime. It's very hard boiled. It's a old school New York film. All those things check boxes of favorite genres for me. And what's particularly striking about Across 110th Street is the fact that it doesn't pull any punches. This movie deals with issues that unfortunately we're still dealing with today, but it does so in that it presents sort of like the old grizzled establishment cop played by Anthony Quinn, who does bend the rules. He does intimidate people. He also has a heart. He also will fix things for the working girls in the neighborhood. He will help people out that maybe are getting too hard of a rap when they're being hauled in to be booked. There is a three-dimensionality to these characters. Same goes for the sort of young, liberal. I hate to use the word liberal because people have a particular view of that politically, but I mean liberal in like the original sense, not necessarily the political sense, but sort of a young liberal cop played by Yaphet Kotto, who ends up becoming his partner, and is more by the book and isn't so rough with perps, and tries to explain to Anthony Quinn's character, hey man, if you're trying to get a confession, you can't really beat it out of people because that's duress, and they're just admitting to it. It doesn't mean they did it. The back and forth between these two is tremendous. Again, because while they could have been really lazy and just writing Anthony Quinn as sort of like this super prejudiced, bigoted white cop, and Yaphet Kotto as sort of like the savior, they didn't do that. They wrote these characters as three-dimensional men trying to make their way in a really tough system, a really tough world of late 60s, early 70s New York. I can't even imagine what it must have been like when you had law enforcement without cameras. You didn't have, we think we take for granted, even though it's not a perfect system. We can check law enforcement now. We can get better evidence of people hurting others, committing crimes. Back in the day, man, you just better hope that you got a good caseworker, got a good cop. And these are all elements that are dealt with in this film. Again, it does show up for those of you that are huge fans of blaxploitation like I am. I'm not in any way speaking down on the genre because I think it's super valuable. I love Pam Grier. I love Fred Williamson. I love all those folks. That was a really necessary genre, I think, in the 70s, coming out of the civil rights era. And if you look at film before then, you just had a lot of black folks either playing support or playing, housekeepers and so forth. You didn't have them as sort of self-possessed, self-determined heroes kicking ass. And that's what you got with blaxploitation. Across 110th Street, while it does have some ass kicking, it's not about that. It's about the complex layers within the lives and the work of not just law enforcement. There is a really, really compelling character in the film, a guy who basically has been committing crime since he was a kid. Someone who was just born, in a bad situation and did what he had to do in order to survive. And we see this guy hatching a plan at the opening of the film. with shotguns, posing as cops, and basically, the setup is they've basically stolen from the mob, and not just any mob, the Italian mob, like the mob. And as you sort of see this guy trying to hide and trying to figure out how does he get out of town, with his woman, to try to get a better life, which was the whole point of them, knocking over these dudes at the beginning of the film. You see the sort of the layers peeled off of this guy, and there's some other complications that occur within his character, within his life, and you can't help but sympathize with this guy. Not sympathize with the crime he committed or the people he hurt any more than you sympathize with Anthony Quinn's character, who can be kind of rough, and frankly unfair at certain points, and then turn around and be completely fair. We've all, I think, probably known people in our lives that, man, they could be bastards, and then they could turn around and I'm like, man, okay, and then you're super nice to these kids. I don't think we're getting enough of that in cinema right now. I'm really bored of sort of the crime thriller genre as it is. It seems to be just very formulaic, not a whole lot of layers, at least based on what I've seen. If we're making stuff like that right now and I haven't seen it, I haven't mentioned it, please let me know in the comments below, because I would love to watch it. It's just so much of the newer stuff is a harder sell for me. Not saying I don't watch it, because I do, but those of you that have watched this channel for a while, I live in the 70s, I live in the 80s, shoot, even the 90s has some great stuff. But Across 110th Street is a perfect sort of time capsule of not just great film acting, but it was the dawn of the 70s and the dawn of what Tarantino and a lot of film scholars call New Hollywood, where you had directors and screenwriters really willing to go into the more raw and real aspects of life. Now, I'm a huge fan of idyllic heroes as anybody else, and we would get a lot of that would come back in the 80s with Indiana Jones, Ghostbusters, Back to the Future. I think The Rocketeer might have been early 90s. So that's all great too, but there's something about the grit and the texture and the substance, just the reality, but sort of beautifully composed reality of 70s cinema. And Across 110th Street really delivers in that respect. Not a single character is written in a way that feels like it's canned, and again, I don't see a whole lot of that today. The other great sort of like surprise of this film is the actor Anthony Franciosa, who those of you, if you're big into Italian horror, was the lead in Dario Argento's classic Tenebrae from 1985, I believe. And Franciosa plays the most chilling, psychotic mobster in this film. I know Franciosa as a more calm, sort of almost like professorial, your neighbor's dad, kind of nice guy. And so I've actually never seen him play a villain before this role. And Franciosa just absolutely crushes in this film. I want to put some names to some characters. So Anthony Quinn is Captain... God damn it, never mind. Captain Frank. You've got Yaphet Kotto as Lieutenant Pope, again, the young upstart. And Franciosa is Nick DeSalvio. There's also a guy in this film who is he's part of the black mob in this film. A guy who, you talk about a voice we'll probably never hear again on screen, because nobody drinks and smokes like they used to. But there's a African-American actor in this film named Richard Ward, who plays a character, Doc Johnson. And this guy, first of all, the eyes on this guy, it's like he looks through you, which, you kind of want, in a gangster. But on top of that, he's got this gravelly voice that I have to assume comes from lots of scotch and cigarettes. I don't know that every once in a while you'll meet somebody that has sort of a smoky, gravelly voice, and it's just how they are. But you don't hear those like you used to because we don't smoke and drink like we used to. Um, it also takes away from, I feel like, a lot of the character in the voices that you hear in film anymore. It's just less interesting. So Richard Ward as Doc Johnson is another. I love it when he comes on screen because he's sort of immovable. He pokes at Franciosa's character of Nick DeSalvia, who is quite a powerful figure in the Italian mob within this film, and Doc Johnson somehow gets away with sticking it to this guy, and it's fun to watch two really sort of titanic, strong characters sort of go at it. It just feels so real. Again, I don't know where you all grew up, but I am old enough to remember like the back end of the 80s and a lot of the 90s, and you still had a lot of mob activity that existed back then. There were, not that people talked about it, but there were certain things that people just understood in places like New York, Chicago, Detroit, what have you, even LA. And that suddenly it began to go away. People got older. It was harder to engage in a lot of these activities. Things sort of went online, and that changed a lot of it. So a lot of the stuff went away. But if you are into gangster films, if you are into crime thrillers, if you are into movies that have a depth and breadth of character, aren't just cookie cutter cutouts, if you want to watch some incredible performances across the board, every single person in this movie is great. There's a guy who shows up in this movie he shows up in a lot of black exploitation films. I believe he worked through the 90s. Why the fuck can't I find him? Antonio Vargas Jr. You know his face if you saw him, especially if you like anything from the 70s and 80s. The guy shows up quite a bit. Just a unique face, a unique talent that's sort of fun in anything that he does. He plays a really kind of tragic character in this film. That again, his character, the way he's layered into the script, into the plot, man, there's a reason this movie is so beloved, and it's not just because it's just a cult film. And while it does exist in that black exploitation era, I would not put this. It's certainly black exploitation adjacent, but definitely not a black exploitation movie per se. And again, it's just because everything in this film is grounded and it's taken very seriously. Not to say that there aren't black exploitation films that take their situation and their character seriously, but there's always aspects of usually, not always, usually aspects of black exploitation films where things just are a little bit over idealized or a little bit more maybe unbelievable. You have Coffee with Pam Grier, which when you think about the situation her character's in, it's really heavy. She's a nurse who's lost family members to drugs and crime in her neighborhood, takes it upon herself to exact justice against the pimps and the pushers. But there's moments in that movie where things maybe seem a little fantastic. Not so much as when you get to Foxy Brown. Foxy Brown, she's almost straight up a superhero. She's kicking ass and taking out, crime bosses, and it's just Tuesday. Now, granted, I love Foxy Brown as much as I love Coffee, but it is a bit more fantastic. And again, part of what I love about Across 110th Street, on top of the Bobby Womack song that is in the film, was also used in Tarantino's Jackie Brown as the opener, Across 110th Street by Bobby Womack. What an incredible, haunting urban ballad that song is. And it appears in the movie at the top of the film. It's not the sort of commercial version that we know. It almost feels somewhat acoustic or maybe a live performance that's used for the film. It doesn't have that waka jawaka that the album version has, that the Jackie Brown and American Gangster versions have, which I believe is the album version. But still, it helps set the tone It drops right as the movie is starting, as the credits are rolling, and it just delivers you right into the film. So yeah, if you want a movie that has no CGI, people haven't had their noses sanded off, people with their original faces, people with their original voices, people who actually had to develop the craft of acting, of cinematography, of directing, uh, and aren't there just because they're pretty. Across 110th Street is just a super important film. I think it's a film I watched it a ton. I watched it a ton last year. Um, it's just so perfectly done. Um, the characters give you enough of what you expect as an audience member of a crime thriller, of a gangster film, of like just an urban crime drama. At the same time, it plays against expectations. It delivers a humanity in so many of the characters that you don't expect, that lazier screenwriters, maybe lazier directors, would not have pulled from and pushed and made sure it came out in their performances. I adore this film. Right now, I believe it is on Tubi for free. We love Tubi. The depth and breadth of great films on that platform. I love it so much. I love Tubi. Uh, it's sort of, for me, I watch a lot of Tubi. I watch a lot of Criterion Channel as well. Um, I'm not a not a mainstream guy. I'm not. My tastes, I don't think, are mainstream. I like mainstream stuff, but I just find myself going back and watching stuff like Across 110th Street, Vigilante from '82, RoboCop from '87, Predator from '86, um, Outland, 1981, Sean Connery. We're going to be dropping that one, or I think we already have, probably as of this recording. Just movies that have been forgotten that, when rediscovered, just really deliver on the art and craft of acting, directing, cinematography, set building, set design, and in some cases, special effects. But Across 110th Street, I think, is a welcome breather, a welcome sort of palate cleanser to the what I've called the video gamification of cinema and film. Nothing, I don't have anything against, special effects, CGI, any of those things. I think these are all tools. I think the more tools you have as a filmmaker, great. But I'm a huge fan of just that flesh and blood, has a soul type of cinema. And if there is a midnight movie out there with a soul and a heart, that will raise you up, that will break your heart, that will make you happy, that you have the life that you have, that will make you think about the concepts of good and evil, of justice, and at the same time provoke your empathy and your sympathy for your fellow human being. Across 110th Street really is the movie for you. So yeah, hop on Tubi, or even better, there's some Blu-rays out there that have incredible extras. I was gifted a Blu-ray, and man, just interviews and extras and all that stuff. We've got to get back to physical media, folks. It's super easy to stream things, but I really miss DVD/Blu-ray extras. I miss having these things in my hand. And if you own it, when things go away from streaming, you don't have to worry about it. You can play it for yourself and your friends at any time. But I'm getting deep in the weeds here. Across 110th Street, Yaphet Kotto, Anthony Quinn, Anthony Franciosa, Richard Ward. Incredible cast, incredible film. Fuck what you heard. Check out 110th Street and let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, I humbly ask if you could hit like, subscribe, share with friends. We would appreciate it. And I'll see yous in the next one.